Unfortunately, I've had enough death in my life.
This will be my third this year alone. I thought I was prepared for what was ahead when my dad passed. Everyone kept telling me, it's different when you lose a parent. They were right. No matter how hard, though, I won't abandon my approach. Always have funeral glasses. And the second is credited to a man named Grant Thornton, who wrote, "The greatest gift to the dead is not grief, but gratitude." This quote goes way beyond just death. Turns out, if you take time to remind yourself of the things for which you have to be grateful, especially when life feels like a nightmare, it brings a level of comfort and peace to you. You might even find yourself cracking a smile on a day you can't stop crying. Today, that's how I hope to honor my father. Gratitude. My dad loved teaching, which made him amazing at it. Some might even say a legend. Because of that, though, Dad wouldn't be happy if I stood up here and just rambled on about how much we loved him. He didn't like when people got up to speak and talk just to talk, or just to fill the time. Have a point, a purpose, something of value to share. So the best way I could think to express my gratitude for my dad and meet his requirements for being up here is by passing on the top life lessons Dad taught me, for which I am the most grateful. Sprinkled, of course, with some John Wayne quotes because he was my dad's favorite. I could only get it down to 7 lessons, but each is quick, I promise. Lesson 1: embrace your uniqueness, learn to laugh, and always leave them guessing. My father's sense of humor was truly unique. It was so dry. He would throw something in mid sentence, and by the time you realized what he had said, he would be 2 sentences past and on to the next thing. It often left people wondering, too, was he joking? One of my favorite examples is when Dad's students used to start to get rowdy. Dad would tell them if they didn't stop, he was going to have to go home and beat the dog. Now, I was never one to turn down the opportunity to go to work with my dad because of stories like this. Anyways, his students would ask me, does he really beat the dog? At first, I would laugh and say, no. After a while, I figured out what Dad was doing, and from then on, when they'd ask, I'd shrug my shoulders and say, I don't really like to talk about that. It wasn't just his students that couldn't tell if he was joking, though. We had a party one time. Dad and our neighbor were eating wings and talking. Mid conversation, Dad looked at him with a straight face and goes, Hey, Bob, if your last name is Ding and you're eating a wing, does that make you a wing ding? I don't think Bob liked that one. It never bothered Dad if someone didn't think he was funny, though. He'd just shrug and say, I thought that was good. Dad also loved a joke with a good punchline. His radio station had a new joke every morning, and we'd hear that joke every night. There were 2 jokes that he loved and used over the years so many times. One of those jokes landed me my first big girl job offer. It goes like this. 2 guys are out and about and they get hungry and they decide they wanted something to eat. One guy says to the other, but what about our dogs? We can't take them in with us. The other guy thinks for a second and then says, I have an idea. Follow my lead. First guy walks up and asks to be seated, and the lady says, Sir, we don't allow dogs in here. Guy says, He's my seeing eye dog. Lady says, All right, and seats him. Guy two saw it work and walks up and asks to be seated. Lady says, Sir, we don't allow dogs in here. Guy says, He's my seeing eye dog. Lady looks at him and says, Sir, that's a chihuahua. Guy goes, They gave me a chihuahua? Regardless, even if his humor wasn't for everyone, it was his, and you couldn't forget it. Lesson 2: stand firm in who you are, but always be willing to learn and evolve. Dad stood firm on his values, even when it meant being the odd man out. He wasn't swayed by popular opinion or the need to be cool. As John Wayne said, a man who won't stand for what he believes isn't a man. Dad wouldn't ever shy away from the conversation either. even if it meant being the odd man out. Dad wanted to learn as much as he wanted to teach. If there was something he didn't know, or he found out he was wrong about, he'd admit he was wrong. That humility, that balance between conviction and curiosity, was one of his greatest strengths. Lesson 3: Yelling is a waste of time. Dad was never one to argue. If you yelled at him, he wouldn't yell back. He'd just wait for you to finish and then continue speaking in the same calm tone as before. When I was younger, I couldn't understand why he wouldn't yell back. I thought that made him weak. But Dad saw another person yelling like John Wayne did, short on ears and long on mouth. Over time, I started to understand why Dad didn't yell back. You can't listen when you're yelling. It doesn't get you anywhere. And most importantly, it doesn't make you right. Dad's calm wasn't weakness, it was self control, it was confidence. It was yet another example of John Wayne. Talk low, talk slow, and don't say too much. Lesson 4: Don't underestimate or be too quick to judge people. Dad was a teacher at Spalding, which was also the high school I attended. That was a blessing and a curse. The blessing was that I was able to learn this lesson at an earlier age. You see, my father was by no means a big guy. He loved to work out, though. Bench pressing was his thing. And as you saw in the entrance, Dad took home some trophies back in his day. Looking at my dad, you could tell he worked out, but you couldn't see exactly how strong he really was. Dad liked to work out in Spalding, my high school's weight room. And most of the sports team were in there with my father at some point. I'd have the biggest and strongest athletes come up to me going, "Yo, your dad can bench press so much." I did not see that coming. Your dad's a beast, though, but I'm definitely not trying to make him mad, which was the cursed part of going to school with my dad. Most guys were terrified of him after seeing him in the weight room, and it made dating really hard. Regardless, when you stop judging people by what you first see or hear and take the time to make the decision yourself, I can promise you, you will get some of the best surprises. Lesson number 5: Don't underestimate yourself and your impact on others. Not becoming a doctor aided Dad a lot. Not only was it what he really wanted to do, he also saw it as a way to give his kids a better life than he had. Not to say he had a bad life, but per his mentor, John Wayne, every man wants his children to be better than he was. Being a teacher didn't make that easy in a lot of ways, but he truly loved it. He often thought he could have done more for the world if he became a doctor. I don't think he really ever understood or believed just how much of an impact he actually had on people. One night, before Dad passed, I told him how grateful I was that he didn't become a doctor, and how proud and how honored I am that I can tell people my dad was a teacher, but not just any teacher, the best teacher. When I was a kid, if we went anywhere in Easton or St. Michael's, there's always a current or previous student who would come running up to my parents like they had just seen a celebrity and then tell me how awesome my parents were as teachers, how my parents changed their lives, inspired them, gave them a memorable story, and the list went on. My favorite were the past students that would come up and drop in the conversation. "I was such a bad kid in your class, you probably hated me." Dad would laugh and always respond with, "Nah, none of my students were bad. You were all great kids." If the kid was actually a terror, though, he'd change it to something like, "Nah, you had your moments, but none of my students were ever truly bad kids." He meant it when he said he didn't have bad students, though. Why his students really respected him was because he showed them respect too. John Wayne again. "I won't be wronged, I won't be insulted, and I won't be laid a hand on. I don't do these things to other people, and I require the same from them." Also, a lot of his students had seen him work out in the weight room, so that definitely helped. But for today, we're going to stick with it, being because he showed his kids the same respect he expected from them. That night, though, I continued by telling my dad if he had become a doctor, he could have helped some people get better, and we could have had more money. But my dad, he made doctors. He helped inspire so many of his students to go into medicine. It wasn't just medicine, though. He helped prepare kids for life and believed in them enough that they started to believe in themselves. You don't have to take my word for it. There's a poster board of comments back there on the wall. Those comments were from just two social media posts that I made about my dad, with comments from past students at only one of those schools. Dad unfortunately had to take my word for it at the time, but I know he sees it now. Bottom line is, it's not what you do in life, it's how you do it. You don't have to be a doctor to change or even save a life, so don't underestimate your impact on others. Lesson 6: Finding forgiveness and offering second chances. Life is about making mistakes. No one is perfect. If you think you are, that's a lesson I don't have time for today, so you're going to have to see me after class. Regardless, we're all going to mess up. We're all going to hurt someone else at some point in our lives. Sometimes it might cost us a lot. There are two parts to this lesson. One, forgiveness isn't guaranteed. You might not be able to fix what happened with a person or a situation. It doesn't mean you don't still try to make something out of it and learn from that mistake. It's not just about fixing things with someone, it's about saving your future self from the same fate. Two, second chances. We all want a second chance. When someone in your life messes up, ask yourself, would I want a second chance? Or would I want others to judge me only for my mistakes? You're probably thinking to yourself, Kate, am I supposed to just forgive everyone, give everyone a second chance? No, but yes, because it doesn't mean you have to forget what they did. Per John Wayne, a man deserves a second chance, but keep an eye on him. Dad had a lot of disappointment in his life, but I think instead he'd prefer we go with a fun example for forgiveness and second chances. So we'll go with an example of a mistake that I made. Dad gave me an emergency credit card when I went to college. He just forgot to define what an emergency was. While at college, my best friend convinced these two guys to give her their puppy. Even though we weren't allowed to have dogs at our place, the guys obliged, and off to get dog food we went. Well, this pet store happened to have a teeny tiny dachshund puppy, and he just happened to look so sad and so sick and scared, and he just needed a little bit of help. And I decided this was an emergency. No worries though. Dad gave me an emergency credit card. $800 later, I was trying to figure out a way to pay back this amount before my parents got the bill. Before that happened, though, my friend and I got caught with the now two puppies we had, and were told we had to get them out right that minute. So I took the dachshund puppy and headed to my parents' house without a plan or any idea of how to explain to my parents why I had this puppy and how to get them to keep it without telling them I paid $800 for it just yet. Please note, at this time, my father was not a huge fan of dogs, like at all. He didn't want them on the furniture, he didn't want to pet them, he didn't want to hold them. He just wasn't a dog person. So on the ride home to my parents' house, I thought I had come up with this brilliant plan. I was going to go tell my parents I found the dog. What I didn't anticipate was my parents taking the dog to PetSmart and offering to give him to anyone who said he was cute. Fortunately, no one took him, which I thought was a sign we were meant to keep him. The problem was I had taken home some laundry and forgotten about the receipt for the dog in the back pocket of some of those jeans I had taken home. To say my parents were mad when they found that receipt is an understatement. Eventually, I was forgiven though, and Dad gave me back the card. My friend and I even found a house that took dogs, but then Dad always had a reason I couldn't take the dog back. Probably because that dog, who we named Baxter, weaseled his way into my dad's heart and became his bestest friend. Regardless, my dad forgave me and gave me a second chance with an emergency credit card. I didn't deserve it. He didn't have to do it, but he knew I made a mistake and gave me the chance to learn from it. Yes, he is my father, and that's what most fathers would do. While this specific story is about me, his approach carried over to everyone. He always believed in the good in people. He didn't get mad. He would just be disappointed in you, which I think many would agree is a lot worse. He was disappointed because he knew that person was better than the behavior or the thing that they did, and he really wanted them to prove that he was right. Sometimes they did, and sometimes they didn't, but he always gave them the chance. Some of those mistakes ended up with happy endings. I mean, heck, he got a new dog out of my mistake, so can't argue with that happy ending. Keeping with a happy theme, I thought I'd close us out with a bonus lesson to summarize the fun things Dad taught me. 1. Ice cream has healing powers, and you can never go wrong with a bowl of ice cream before bed. I highly recommend it. 2. There's something to be said for a 1950s style Christmas. The fat tree with tinsel and garland, a train under the tree, and ornaments that don't match. It wasn't just the tree, though. It was the magic Dad showed me Christmas brings. The lesson and the important piece here is Christmas is only as magical as you make it, and the magic starts from within. Number 3, John Wayne seems like a pretty solid person to look up to. Aside from all these lessons, I hope you take away one thing. Gratitude isn't just an emotion, it's a mindset, a way of living. You don't have to leave here today expressing gratitude for my dad, but I challenge you to find 3 things to be grateful for every day this week. If you do, and you channel a little of dad's self-control while you do it, you might find that the mountains in your head don't look quite as big anymore. I'll get you started. We can all be grateful that we had someone like my father who cared about and believed in every one of us, even when we didn't believe in ourselves. As for me, my work expressing gratitude to my dad has just begun. So this part is for you, Dad. Remember when I was really little and you made me promise you 3 things? 1, I'd never let you buy a motorcycle. 2, I'd never let you go bungee jumping. 3, I'd never let you move to Florida. I realized I didn't have much control of those things, but I never forgot the promise, and you didn't do any of those. Now that we've accomplished that promise, it's time for the next. I promise to embody all the things you taught me. I promise to inspire others through my actions. I promise to believe in others the way you did. I promise to always eat a bowl of ice cream before bed. I promise to never stop sharing the lessons you've taught me. Mostly, I promise I'll do my best to make you proud, Daddy. I love you always, and then I'll love you more.